head on over there right now. Patreon.com/JURY. Anyway, it's me, Kylo Ren. Well, I guess I'll just see you guys later.
Politics, 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 politics.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this, the Politics program for May 31st. My name is Justin Robert Young. I will be your humble host through this, a traipsing through the week that was in politics. One big thing that I do want to point out, thank you guys, everybody. The support for the Patreon is overwhelming. We have never had more patrons. We have never had as much support as we do right now. I have had an absolute blast doing these headline shows. So if you want more of this in your life, I'm making it available now. Just head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/JURY. Thank you to Insecure Kylo Ren for doing our ad read. One more thing up top. We are giving away one free Contender expansion a week from people on our mailing list. Sign up now at bit.ly/Contender Games. That is capital C, Contender, capital G Games. And you can buy the Contender at thecontender.us. New expansion, Heavy Lies the Crown, out now, including quotes from Trump's first 100 days. And that is shipping as of today. I'm literally leaving right here and running on off to the headquarters, the Contender headquarters, to go ship out everything. So if you want it, like, within the next 3 days, you want to buy this weekend, you better order right now. Okay. So thank you to everybody for supporting the show. I don't know why I'm saying that. I'm literally just killing time. Let's get into this. From the last time that we talked, we had the Montana special election. And, of course, in true politics fashion, not but hours after I posted the podcast, did we have a member of the a participant in the election decide to choke slam one of the people that is covering it, Ben Jacobs of The Guardian. And, of course, it mattered not at all. Now, this caused quite a bit of liberal hand-wringing, which is like a favorite thing to do amongst liberal circles, is to wring hands. But nothing compared to this fun little chestnut. This here from Salon.com. Of course, a bastion of keeping calm and moving on. Here is their commentary from this Saturday, May 27th, written by Andrew O'Hare. Wake up, liberals. There will be no 2018 blue wave and no Democratic majority and no impeachment. Lessons of Montana. There's no quick fix for Trump or our damaged democracy, and Democrats look hopeless. Hopeless, he says. Oh, no. Wait a minute. The fact that a Democrat, a former folk singing Democrat who's got serious financial problems, could only come within 6 points of a Republican in a state that Donald Trump won by 20 points? You're right. You're right. This is hopeless. This is hopeless. You want to know what? We can just forget it. Just forget it. Just forget that there was ever any hope. You want to know what? Hey, Kanye, what do you think is going to happen in 2018?
Just the way
Not according to Andrew. Not according to Andrew. How about you, the Decemberists? What do you think that is going to happen to the Republicans in 2018?
And quietly get swallowed by a wave.
Well, that's not the case according to this article on Slate. Have you reconsidered the Decemberists?
It gets swallowed by a wave.
Well, I mean, listen, you're not going to be happy according to this. Let's go ahead and read a little bit more. We received a message from the future this week directed to the outraged liberals of the so-called anti-Trump resistance. It was delivered by an unlikely intermediary, Greg Gianforte, the Republican who won a special election on Thursday and will soon take his seat in Congress as Montana's lone representative. Here's a trivia question to distract you from the doom and gloom. Without recourse to Google, how many other states can you name that has only one House seat? This is a great first paragraph. Just great first paragraph because you've already stoked fear. You've set up your premise that this is fait accompli based on a special election in Montana, and then you smugly announced your own little trivia at the end of it. If you found yourself ashen-faced and dismayed on Monday morning because you really believe the Montana election would bring a sign of hope and mark the beginning of a return of sanity in American politics, then the message encoded in Gianforte's victory is for you. It goes something like this. Get over Montana and stop trolling yourself with that stupid special election in Georgia, too. They don't mean anything. And anyway, that dude John Ossoff, he's about the lamest excuse for a national progressive hero in the entire history of the Democratic Party, milquetoast triangulation. And since we're on the subject, forget about the blue wave of 2018. Wait, the what?
Just a wave.
Forget about the Democratic majority of 2019. Forget about the impeachment of President Donald Trump if you've been paying attention, because none of that stuff is happening and it's all a massive distraction. None of it. None of it is happening. The wave is... And cancel Christmas! It's over. Not only is the blue wave over, everything's over in the Democratic Party, according to Salon.com. Oh my God. This is one of the funniest things, man. I really love this. This is really exciting to me. Because I'll be honest, I'm paying more attention to special elections than I ever have before. And granted, I took a few political science classes, but I'm not enough of a mega junkie that I would watch special elections this early, normally. But we're hot. We're hot for this kind of stuff. And so now all of a sudden, we're trying to make mountains out of molehills. Because special elections in congressional districts or statewide special elections are not political national referendums. Not to be a buzzkill here, but all politics is local. And the results of these elections are far more about the localities than they are about our national mood on Trump. Now, there's other ways that you can look at the national mood on Trump. Obviously, they are all imperfect. You can look at generic ballots, Democrat versus Republican. Democrats are doing pretty well in those. You can look at direction of the country. You can look at President Trump's approval ratings. You could even, as was suggested by the 538 podcast, get a little more nitty-gritty into the numbers and look at Donald Trump's strong approval. So you are looking at the chipping away of his most ardent fans. And there seems to be a steady erosion there. And if you really, 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 really want to be responsible, you can look at special elections and you can say, okay, despite the fact that these have the trappings of the thing we just went through, the national election, the presidential election, this is not everything is Trump versus Clinton. Everything is not everything. And Nothing that we have seen here is in any way a referendum on where the Democrats are going to be in 2018. We are looking at the stems and fragments of tea to read the tea leaves. We don't even see the tea leaves yet. These elections are not for a year and a half. Do you know what can happen in a year and a half? A lot. And there is no mechanism that I'm aware of that allows the Democratic Party to move up the midterm elections to right now. Yo, what if we voted right now? What if we just voted right now? What if we voted at this motherfucking Vogue party? Would we be the life of the whole party? Not according to Salon.com, we wouldn't. Wake up, liberals. The wave is over. Who knows? I mean, like, honestly, this is the most hyperventilation I have ever seen. Because, by the way, if you want to be responsible, that was a good showing. That was a really, really good showing by the 45 caliber man. Mr. Queest had a really good, he had a good run. You know, he came within 6 points. In Montana, a place that voted for Donald Trump by 20 points, and he was running against a guy who was wrapping himself in the Trump flag. Now, for everybody who wants to just, oh my God. Again, how do liberals have hands? You would have thought that they would have wrung them off by now. You can tell somebody who is deep embedded. Basically, all Pod Save America listeners, they don't have actual hands. They just have tiny little nubs because they've been wringing them so much. Oh, jeez. Oh, jeez. Calm down. That was fairly good news. What you've gotten so far is in gigantic Republican strongholds, Democrats overperforming expectations. If Quist had won that, it would have been a huge upset. The fact that he came within 10 points is a good sign for Democrats. Not if you read liberalsalon.com. And we can now turn to the Georgia 6. We got a good email on that a little bit later. We're also going to be covering Kathy Griffin. We're also going to be covering Spicer coming back. And of course, we are going to cover Covfefe. Covfefe. Waffleophagus in the chat says also, the choking out didn't have much of an effect on the election because 40% of the votes had already been cast in mail-in ballots. I actually think it was more than that. The stats I was reading had them closer to 2/3. So, yeah. Gianforte choke slammed Ben Jacobs, which of course means that Kane has only been in Republican politics for a month and a half, and people are already biting his moveset. I'm just saying, Gianforte, you are in for some wrestler's court, because that, my brother, is gimmick infringement. Let me ask you all a question, though. How, if at all, do you like your politics from rich people? And not even rich people. Let's say celebrities, right? Musicians. This is how Roger Waters is now opening his shows when he does The Wall. It is a gigantic video wall in huge black and white stark lettering says Trump is a pig. I got this topic from listening to the Tony Kornheiser show, one of my favorite podcasts, where they were speaking about U2 and how much U2 talks politics during their concerts. Obviously, Roger Waters as well. Rich tradition of musicians speaking out politically. By and large, unless they're country, it's usually a liberal message, right? Not a ton of rock and roll conservatives. They exist. They're Ted Nugents. But by and large, it's a liberal way to go. I'm just curious, do you guys like it, or is there a little dance that can be done? Or do you want to keep it out at all? Because in general, I don't much care whether or not actors or musicians talk about their political views. In general, I always find them a little shallow. So, I guess I just don't put a lot of weight on them. But I know a lot of people get upset about it. A lot of people in general. And this isn't even just famous musicians. This isn't even just famous actors. Streamers. Podcasters. Get really, really hot when people that are on shows that aren't specifically about politics talk politics. But what I'm challenging you guys here, and you can email me, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Again, theyoungamerican@gmail.com, is to give me what you can do. Is there a loophole? Is there a sentence that can be said? Is it keeping it to the end of a show instead of weaving it into all of it? Is it the fact that sometimes, especially now post-Trump, you oftentimes have entire shows derailed by political conversations that otherwise would be about something else? Is it that? Let's map this out a little bit. Aside from just don't put it in the blank. Assume that when politics is as hot as it is right now, that everyone's going to talk about it in some level. Are there good faith guidelines that we can say, okay, well, at least he did blank, or at least she did blank? What I'm going to suspect is that nobody will say that the way that Kathy Griffin handled things is the way to handle things. Kathy Griffin became cause du jour yesterday on Twitter because TMZ ran, what we would assume you could only say are shocking photos. Kathy Griffin, comedienne, in a very smart blue blouse with a big old bow on it, holding up the bloodied, severed head of Donald Trump. She's got a grim face in a way that that is meant to say don't F with me. I am here to not take prisoners. She's got a very blank expression on her face. And the Donald Trump head is just gruesome. Just, blood, the old crimson mask all over all of it. This was broken by TMZ. I think Tyler Shields is the photographer. I'm not familiar with Mr. Shields' work. Kathy Griffin immediately apologized. Once everything broke, she said, "I'm sorry I went too far. I was wrong." This was met. Well, here we go. Let's see if we can. Let's see if we can get a little bit of Kathy's audio here. Unless they're gonna try and give me an ad. Let's see. We got an ad? No, we got an ad. All right. Kathy Griffin went to her Twitter. She said the following here.
It's me, Kathy Griffin. I sincerely apologize. I am just now seeing the reaction of these images. I'm a comic. I cross the line. I move the line, then I cross it. I went way too far. The image is too disturbing. I understand how it offends people. It wasn't funny. I get it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my career. I will continue. I asked your forgiveness, taking down the image, going to ask the photographer to take down the image, and I begged for your forgiveness. I went too far. I made a mistake, and I was wrong.
Kathy Griffin, sans makeup in what looks to be somebody's waiting room or maybe her living room. I don't know. Looks like some very nice decorative pottery behind her. Somebody is very tastefully decorated. Now, here's what I want to talk about. Because there is something that I've noticed. And take this in the spirit that it's offered, because I am not trying to say that everything's equal or that this isn't a hashtag both people do it kind of situation. I am going to say that in general, very specifically, not with this, but in general, the idea of what if somebody killed the president is more likely to be understood and discussed as dangerous art if it's a Republican president, where it's hate speech on the other side, if it's a Democratic president. It's a dangerous idea being given voice to if it's a Democratic president. Now, personally, I am probably more on the side of dangerous art. Credible threats to the president, I think, need to be understood and reacted to. But to say that there can never be a fictional world in which the sitting president is killed, like was done in an independent film for George W. Bush, and obviously very gruesomely was done with this photographer and Kathy Griffin, I think there should be some kind of room for it. That's me. Now, I oftentimes can get myself in trouble with stuff like this because I want to believe in this high-minded ideal that may or may not have any actual practicality in the real world. But I do think, hypothetically, we should not think that Kathy Griffin taking a stupid photo is a threat on the president. Is dangerous art, in general, art that pushes boundaries, tasteless, ugly, and awful? Very often, to me, the answer is yes. 150%. There's a lot of provocative art that is literally just there to drive a reaction. And very often, I think that dangerous art is mean-spirited. Like the Piss Christ. Ever remember the Piss Christ? Like it was a jar of piss that they put a crucifix in with Jesus on the cross. That was mean. That was a really mean thing. Oh, now we gotta look up. Nobody knows. Nobody remembers Piss Christ. Oh my God, Piss Christ. Go ahead and look up Piss Christ on Wikipedia. Immersion, aka Piss Christ, is a 1987 photograph by American artist and photographer Andre Serrano. It depicts a small plastic crucifix submerged in a glass of the artist's urine. The beast was a winner at the Southeast Center of Contemporary Arts Awards of the Visual Arts Competition. It was sponsored in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, a United States government agency that supports funding for artists. This wound up being a bigger thing, though, at a show, I believe. Yeah, here we go. During a retrospective of Serrano's work at the National Gallery of... oh, here we go. Yeah, this was a huge issue. And has always drawn controversy wherever it's been featured. The fact that this was taxpayer funded wound up becoming the biggest issue. And also, to be fair, reveals some of the problems of government funding for the arts. Because ultimately, from an artist perspective, you want to be able to make Piss Christ, right? But if that's taxpayer money, and a lot of taxpayers believe that putting a crucifix in a jar of your own wiener juice is objectionable, then they got a question as well. It's a sticky situation. But it is weird. I will say this. It was weird because Kathy Griffin got shot down pretty quickly with this. There was not a ton of support for the photographs. And the fact that TMZ ran them the way that they did, where they knew that she was going to get in trouble immediately, tells you a little something about the, what many refer to as kind of outrage culture, right? Because the TMZ post was kind of baiting the right for an outrage. Or you can say, hey, this is something ugly, something awful. It is the height of liberal hypocrisy, because God forbid anybody drew President Barack Obama in an unflattering way racist. But a well-known comedian, not only that, but somebody that is entrusted by CNN to host their New Year's Eve revelry each year, she can decapitate Donald Trump and hold aloft his bloody severed head, and now it's art. And oh my God, there's a video, if you guys haven't seen this, of Kathy Griffin just being so proud of herself right before they take the photos, where she's like, me and Tyler aren't afraid to take challenging pictures. Well, turned out to be pretty challenging. Turned out to be pretty challenging. We did have a return of one of our faves. One of our faves, babe. Sean Spicer. He came in like a wrecking ball. In fact, the only way that this would have been better is if Sean Spicer was naked on a wrecking ball as he swung into the White House briefing room. I thought this was actually a fairly good performance by Spicer. I think very often he can get himself rattled by the press. But eventually, all press secretaries all wind up in the same tone. Have you ever noticed that all press secretaries eventually settle into the tone of very patient loathing? They all talk about like this. I agree. Well, I'm not going to stop my tone of conversation, because as soon as I stop, you're going to ask another question, and I very much believe that this is this, that, and the other. Fritz X007 says there were press secretaries before Spicer. Yeah, Believe it or not, there were. And Spicer's starting to get that tone. He's not arguing with these people. He's just trying to lay stuff out, and he almost got caught up. In fact, he got fairly caught up right at the very end, where he wound up going back and forth about fake news. What is fake news? And what is real love? Nobody asked that one. I would like to ask Sean Spicer. In respect to fake news, what is real love? Real love. All right, so here we go. This is one of the quotes. The president tweeted Tuesday morning that Russian officials were laughing at the U.S. about how a lame excuse for why the Dems lost the election has taken over the fake news. Spicer said that Trump, like him and so many others, are frustrated when he sees stories come out that are patently false, to see narratives that are wrong, to see quote-unquote fake news. When you see stories get perpetrated that are absolutely false, that are not based in fact, that's troubling, and he is rightly concerned. When asked, what is fake news, he responded that a BBC reporter tweeted a video that went viral on Friday. The 20-second clip appears to show the president ignoring Italian Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni. Paolo Gentiloni. While other G7 leaders were listening to a translation, but others pointed out that Trump had an earpiece in his right ear that was simply not visible in the frame. Spicer singled out New York Times reporter Peter Baker for apparently shaking his head at the choice of the tweet as an example of fake news, and dismissed Acosta's assertion that reporters make mistakes. That's just fake, Spicer said of the tweet. All right. This is what I find very interesting about this conversation. And believe it or not, despite the fact that I think that Sean Spicer's kind of a clown, and at some point he will indeed end up in a line waiting for Dippin' Dots at a daytime Nationals game, and that time is before the All-Star game, I believe that this is a point worth making. For this reason. I'm sympathetic to how easy it is for journalists to be wrong, especially in the Twitter age. You are ultimately only going to war with the facts that you have. And there are a million different ways that the facts can be wrong, even when you do your due diligence. There are a lot of ways that things can be misrepresented, misreported. You could be outright lied to. You can trust the source. Ultimately, you can only trust your sources and then try to follow up on them. But at the same time, they came at Spicer and they said, name me some fake news. And Spicy came right back and named him some fake news. Now, that might not have been big enough, and the reporter started to clamor for, no, give me another one. Give me another one. Give me something big. Is Kushner fake news? But that was Spicer playing the game. You asked him a dumb question. The dumb question is, what's fake news? Well, he named you one. That's fine. You got to accept that. You got to say, listen, he was wrong, but you can't say that as an excuse. You got to take that on the chin. You got to separate this conversation about fake news from the questions that you really want answered. Because you can't have it both ways. You can't be on this crusade of why, you are 1,000-foot view meta argument. You're devaluing the concept of truth by saying things are fake news. Wringing my hands, wringing my hands, wringing my hands. You can't say that And then also ask what you should be asking, pointed questions about the facts at hand right now. And right now, the questions are about how long has Jared Kushner been in talks with the Russians, if that is true? Is Reince Priebus getting fired? Are you getting fired, Spicy? Leads that will shape the first draft of history. Because ultimately, there is a major problem with journalists. And I hate painting journalists with a broad brush because I think it's totally redundant. But this is something that I do find, if not universal enough that it's an industry-wide problem. Journalists hate being challenged on their process. Hate being challenged on their process. Very sensitive, extraordinarily sensitive about their process in a way that is odd because the entire job of a journalist is to challenge other people's processes. Theoretically, you should be the most understanding person on the planet. That, yeah, obviously we're going to get something wrong. In the same way that the White House isn't always going to get everything that they want. That when they tried to jam the first health care bill down the House's throat, that was a failure. That when they wrote out these executive orders about the Muslim travel ban on the back of a cocktail napkin and tried to get them pushed through, that was an absolute failure. We all fail sometimes. We are obviously in a very antagonistic relationship on both sides between the White House and the press corps. Probably the most antagonistic I have ever seen in my lifetime, with respects for Reagan, which I don't really remember all that much personally. But we're not serving anybody if this is about these larger meta conversations, as opposed to actually advancing the stories of the day. And a lot of times, that means very boring answers from press secretaries. You have to ask him every day, who did Kushner meet with? Why did he meet with him? What was exchanged? Spicer has to say, I don't know, shut up, you smell. He doesn't have to say that, but he's going to say something professionally like that. I talked about this a little bit on the headlines thing Monday, but it's worth revisiting because it right now is erupting here in the chat. I think this Kushner story is being very weirdly reported because we are getting these like weird, well, Kushner talked to the Russians about setting up a back channel, allegedly, during the transition. The issue that we're facing right now that is under investigation is whether or not Russian meddling in the election involved the Trump campaign. I don't see a lot of intentional separation about the timeline of these stories in a way that I think probably should happen more. That should be in the beginning of your story. That the investigation is into the election. This happened after the election. Now, they might be related, and if they are related, the facts will build that bridge. But as an assertion, I think we're just doing a lot of insinuation here in the reporting and discussion about this that I don't think is fair. Nor do I think it makes us smarter or better. And that's ultimately all I care about. Let's assume they're dirty. There's a lot of jumping to conclusions about how Kushner, who apparently became fascinated with Donald Trump running for president because of his data and analytics of his Facebook page, that let's say in a conspiracy theory The Russians wanted to talk to him, and they wanted to exchange information because Kushner could provide internal Trump data that Russian operatives could then use to spam different areas of the country. But we don't know that. And we should probably wait until we do before we talk about it like we all know that. But enough of all this substance. Oh my God. I get so tired of trying to talk about substance when we could be talking about the only thing that really matters. And that is the magic, the majesty of Covfefe. Oh, Covfefe. Oh, oui, oui. Ah, Covfefe. Covfefe. Covfefe.
Covfefe. Who can figure out the true meaning of Covfefe?
Last night, Donald Trump tweeted out, with all the negative press, Covfefe. Covfefe. Is what he what he tweeted here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the actual. Who can figure out? Oh wait, no. Here we go. No. What was the deleted one? Despite the constant negative press, Covfefe. The constant negative press.
Covfefe.
That was at 12:06 a.m. He wakes up at 6 o'clock in the morning, deletes that tweet, and says, who can figure out the true meaning of
Covfefe? Enjoy.
I'm not going to do the, what this really means. You can read this Chris Saliza post if you want to go to a deep dive on Covfefe. Oh, wait, sorry.
Covfefe.
I don't think it really means anything. I think, listen, here's the lesson of
Covfefe.
we got a tweeting-ass president. That man tweets. Sometimes he does what a lot of people who tweet a lot do. He tweets something out by accident. He thinks he's hitting another button. He hits the wrong button. Although, by the way, what does that tell you about the cocoon that guy's in? That he can tweet something that blows up the internet like that did last night, go to sleep and wake up like anybody else and be like, oh, crap, what the hell? Oh, jeez. There's literally nobody that's got access to him on that kind of level that can be like, yo, can we get this taken care of? Can we pull this down real quick? Hey, sorry to bother you, Prez. I know these are dark hours, but it appears that you tweeted some nonsense. Unless you want to tell me exactly what
Covfefe
really means, then, if you want to do that, then go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and recommend that we pull this one here down. Internet had a blast with it. It will be forgotten by the time that we do the headline show on Friday. I guarantee you. Nobody really cares about this. Here's what we do care about. Elections on this show. We care about elections like no other podcast. And that means that sometimes we got to head outside of our borders. we have to make our way across the pond. We got to take a look at the UK and their election in this version of
Get on the floor if you got that booty.
the poll. Dance, 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 dance.
That booty.
This is the newest YouGov survey of 50,000 interviews to see, seat by seat, who will win the British parliamentary election. Coming first to the stage with 10 seats, put your hands together for the Liberal Democrat. With 51 seats, we have the Scottish National Party.
Get on the floor if you got that booty.
But your headliners, we have with 257 seats, the Labour Party.
That booty.
And your headliner, Mother May I, it is the Conservative Party with 310 seats. Which, because this is a parliamentary election and nothing can be simple with these crazy catastrophes, it means that the Conservatives would lose control of the House or of the Parliament because they need 326 seats to form a government, which means they would need to make I don't know, they got to make an alliance or something. This was the talk of the town when it came to the British parliamentary election, because this was called early by the Conservative Party, by Theresa May, and if it bit her in the butt, it would feel to be a real backfire for her. So, the YouGov poll has been derided. I don't know if anybody in England trusts a poll post-Brexit, but we'll see. Someone says an alliance, like in World of Warcraft? Yeah. Think of European elections like World of Warcraft. I'll let you know, or let you decide who the orcs are. All right. Let's get into our emails. JustinRobertYoung@gmail.com. Again, JustinRobertYoung@gmail.com. Wrong email. TheYoungAmerican@gmail.com. TheYoungAmerican@gmail.com. Jerry Springer is running for the Ohio governorship. That, according to Jim. Oh, my God, dear. Why? This is the guy who got kicked out of office for writing a bounce check to a prostitute. Why? Why, Democrats? Why? You have got to follow this Ohio governor's race, but holy crap, it's turning into a who's who shit show. That sounds like my kind of race. Tyler writes, I'd be lying if I said that politics was my only source of political news. But it is my primary source. I suffer from acid reflux. Usually it isn't much of a problem, and I don't need to take medication unless I get really stressed out. Most often that happens during extremely busy times at work, but also it happens during the 2008 Bush bailouts. I stopped paying attention to politics back in 2008 and made my constant heartburn go away. but also made finishing my degree in political science an interesting challenge. After a couple years, I started paying attention to politics again. But this last election and the actions of our current president have got my bile rising again. I've decided to take another break from most political news, but I'm continuing to watch PX3 as your lighthearted coverage usually doesn't make me angry. I can't stand most political humor shows, as even when they are witty, they often seem to be smug, mean-spirited, unfair, and when I actually know something about the subject, ignorant to the topics they are discussing. You don't come off as mean or smug in your podcast, and if you're ignorant, I wouldn't know, because most of the time you're just jabbering about stuff I don't know anything about. Thanks for saving my esophagus. I am for this, Tyler. I am for you listening to me for medicinal reasons only as your primary source of political news. For everybody else, please don't use this show as your primary source of political news. Tom G. writes, as part of our book club suggestions, you should consider The Insane Clown President by Matt Taibbi. Maybe, Tom. The reason why I wouldn't say that this is a great fit for the book club that we're trying to build is that that's more of a Taibbi's writing, although very entertaining, is more analysis than it is firsthand off-the-record reporting, which is what I want to focus on because those are my favorite genre of books, and I love them as they begin to come out after an election. Is just all the people that, like, these books have been written for a year and a half. They've been getting off-the-record quotes forever from people very deep inside the campaigns, and now we kind of get to see the tea spilled a little bit. Matthew writes, in regard to the book Shattered, I enjoyed it, and while I understand it was generally from the point of view of the Clinton campaign, I also felt that it left out a pretty big aspect of Clinton's email problems. They completely ignored Clinton deleting tens of thousands of emails which had been subpoenaed and then scrubbing the server before handing it over. Every time I hear a Hill dog declare, but her emails, I think to myself, yep, her emails. Lying about them for nearly a year and then doing everything possible to ensure some of them would never see the light of day is problematic, right? I was never a fan of Hillary and less a fan of Trump. And when I look for someone to blame for Trump winning the White House, I blame Hillary and the DNC. The refrain of but her emails plays well among Hillary supporters who view the email scandal as a nothing burger, but it really highlights their ignorance as to why Hillary truly lost. She cannot be trusted. I also blame the rest of you people for not writing in Nick Saban like I did. Roll damn Tide! Thank you very much, Matthew, for writing in. I do agree that the email thing was more complicated. And I think that the book, for my taste, did go into the rift in her campaign about Hillary not being more forthcoming about the entire process and being all too secretive about it, which I took as a catch-all to mean some of the behavior that you're describing. But you're right. It for enough Americans, especially in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that was a problem. It eroded trust, and then they fell in love with a man who told them everything they wanted to hear, which, by the way, is what politics is. I'm not trying to say that cynically. That's what politics is. As we're getting in here, more damn eagle. So already, we're getting into a fight. Although now, that's getting me thinking, if I do the jury in your house tour during college football, maybe that justifies me swinging through the South a little bit more. Vlad writes, what's the general vetting process you use for news sources to determine how reliable they are? Maybe walk us through an example. I also fall under the gets most of his political news from Justin banner. Oh, jeez. Although I supplement it with some of the New Republic just because it came installed on my phone and I haven't bothered to get rid of the notifications. I want to become more politically savvy but lack the guidance. My father is a hardcore Limbaugh, Jones, and Hannity guy, so I figure I'll get a very one-sided answer from him. Let me just say this. I don't look at journalistic sources as reliable. I look at journalistic sources as how good they are in the moment. You can often tell that papers, writ large, what we think of them are very often 2 or 3 different people. How well they're doing at their job, how plugged in they are to the subject they are covering. So once you determine who's getting stuff from where, you then can generally look at editorial stuff. It's like the New York Times. The New York Times editorially tends to like to speak to things a little bit more narratively than I like personally. They want to tell you the story. And this very often, I think, leads to ill-informed, if not outright biased reports. This is where the New York Times gets in trouble with John McCain's mistress and some of them, a lot of the things that conservatives will point out as bias. For the New York Times, I think for them falls under but this is the narrative. And we know more than we can publish, but this is leading you in the right direction. So I tend to look at all the New York Times stuff as, okay, well, what are they reporting? What are the facts? And then what do I believe their narrative on this is? Washington Post, same way. They're not as narrative driven, but they definitely are more susceptible to trusting anonymous sources that they have known for a very long time. Because a lot of the people who run Washington never leave Washington. They're not elected officials that then go back home. They're people that live in Washington. They are bureaucrats. And the Washington Post, in my humble opinion, is more willing to trust them because they know them. They're covering an industry like anybody else would cover an industry. And then you get into the whole blogosphere, and obviously a lot of outlets are there to cater to a certain crowd. They're there to cater to conservatives. So I read Breitbart primarily to see where the lines are in the Republican Party. Who's shifting where and who's leaking in general. I don't read Breitbart to get the full news. I read InfoWars or the _Donald to understand where the grassroots of a certain very loud element of conservative media is leading. Sometimes that stuff bleeds in to the mainstream, the more mainstream elements. Sometimes it doesn't. But I like to know where it's coming from. And sometimes I like to read salon.com because it's interesting to watch liberals put themselves in a hirsute and slap themselves with horsetails. Noisemaker Joe says, I can't figure out why the Democrats are still playing into the hands of hardline conservative spokespeople. I will sometimes spend some time in the AM talk station at work and listen to Michael Savage or Mark Levine or John Batchelor. It's amazing to me how much of an easy target your major Democratic players make themselves for these people. Take the Comey firing, for instance. These were the loudest. Those that were the loudest for calling for his firing after he torpedoed Clinton were the loudest calling for Trump all kinds of names for firing him when he did. All Levine had to do was go to the takes that made Schumer and his pals look like idiots. I mean, these AM talk guys don't seem to actually talk political ideology all that much. It's just ISIS is going to kill us, and socialism is taking over, and the Democrats are idiots. Usually with the Democrats taking the blame for the first two. Would it not be beneficial for the Democrats to be less hypocritical lizard people so as to make Trump look even worse? Or are they simply too arrogant and morally superior to care about such fringe commentators to not worry about feeding into their narratives? It seems like right-wing people using the liberals are dumb argument seems to work a lot better for them than it seems to do for the left-wingers. Well, you know, you would say that Keith Olbermann certainly made a very good living for himself playing that card on the left-hand side. You know, crowning people the most evil person in the world, the worst person in the world. I do think that in general there will be a Democratic or liberal candidate who makes a point to say, I am not trying to fight a culture war. I want to talk with everybody, but I believe that these systems work better. Like a son of Bernie Sanders type. I think that might be the kind of lane that, I'm not going to name names here, but let's just say theoretically maybe the CEO of a company that rhymes with Schmacefook might be trying to steer into. But right now I do think that there is a problem for the Democratic Party, and it is smug superiority. I think that it's a turnoff. And I think that it's a turnoff for a portion of their base. I think that a portion of their base does not cotton to, well, of course we're right, we're Democrats. I think that they identify more with some of the blue-collar aesthetic of the Republicans, as corny as it might be. So I think you have identified something here, Noisemaker Joe. I don't know where the winner is going to be, though. Maybe it could be the new, mighty member of the Democratic Party,
Johnny Covfefe.
And finally, Thomas Wilson writes, I'm sure you're aware that there is a congressional race going on in the Georgia 6th District, but what needs to be understood is that this election is the perfect mess. Our district is just outside of Atlanta, so there's no problem in getting coverage in the media, and we live in the backyard of largely liberal Atlanta, but what I think you'd find interesting is the political mudslinging done by both sides of this race. The first race began much like the presidential one, with a phalanx of Republicans running, and only one really getting votes, Karen Handel, former Secretary of State of the state, and one strong Democrat, John Ossoff. At first, the campaign was just purely against the Democrat with no special support for any Republican candidate. But that did something that could only be done in our day and age for a smear campaign. They found an old Facebook video of the Democratic candidate dressing up as Han Solo and remaking Star Wars A New Hope with his drinking buds, but he still got to go to the runoff. Now, at the start of the runoff campaign, it was discovered that the Republican candidate had a plan suggesting to spend $15,000 on new chairs and traveling to China on the government's dime. And now the Republicans have begun to run a series of ads featuring liberals thanking Ossoff and Nancy Pelosi and how ISIS is overrated, making the perfect strongman. This election has been a mess since the runoff and will only get any better until June. Until then, there will be hit ads and nightly political phone calls about people I am too young to vote for. All right. Here's the reason why you are getting all this kind of opposition research, no matter how far down the barrel they got to scrape it from. Money, 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 money. Everybody's got a price. And somebody has paid the piper to find these videos and put them in smear ads. This is the going to be the most expensive congressional runoff election in history. It is certainly an anomaly for this point in the political calendar. For whatever reason, it is being seen as the proxy war between post-Trump Democrats and Trump's America. Does it actually mean anything? No, of course not. I think that this means more than Montana. I think it means more than Wyoming because Jon Ossoff is polling to win in some of these polls. But if Jon Ossoff came close, within a sea hair of victory, then yeah. I think it would be a major thing. It would still show that the Democrats are very, very close to, possibly. What do you think, Colin? Will the Republican majority
And quietly get swallowed by a wave?
Maybe. It might. That's what everybody wants. This election in the 6th District of Georgia to tell us a year and a half ahead of time. We do have one breaking news here before we wrap up. Just coming in, James Comey is going to testify publicly about his Trump confrontations. Oh, my God. CNN and autoplay ads. Fired FBI Director James Comey plans to testify publicly in the Senate as early as next week to confirm bombshell accusations that Donald Trump pressured him to end his investigation into top Trump aides to Russia, a source close to the issue said Wednesday. Final details are being worked out and no official date for the testimony has been set. Comey is expected to appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is investigating possible connections between the Trump campaign and Russia during last year's presidential election. Comey has apparently spoken to special counsel Robert Mueller to work out the parameters of his testimony to ensure that there are no legal entanglements as a result of his public account. Comey will likely sit down with Mueller, a longtime colleague at the Justice Department, for a formal interview only after his public testimony. So it looks like this will circle around exactly what Trump told him and when that happened. So we shall see. But, folks, again, that wraps it up for today. We are giving away one free Contender expansion a week for everybody who signs up to our mailing list. Sign up now, bit.ly/Contender Games. That is capital C, capital G. Brand new Contender expansion. Heavy Lies the Crown. Available right now. Shipping today. You can email the show, theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Follow me at Justin R. Young everywhere and download archived episodes of this show at bonerwars.com. Remember, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics. This is the only show that talks about all three of them. I think I missed the politics in there. We'll see you guys later.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.